Welcome to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tom Kelly, your nonprofit catalyst. As the founder of Charity Auctions Today and Donor Books, I've spent almost 2 decades helping organizations like yours break through fundraising barriers, engage communities on a deeper level, and accelerate meaningful growth. In this podcast, along with my incredible guests, we'll uncover transformational ideas, tackle challenges head-on, and share insider strategies that you won't find anywhere else. Each episode is designed to take your nonprofit to the $1 million mark and beyond, because impact doesn't scale by chance, it scales by choice. So let's get started. Katie, thanks so much for being on the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Tom. I'm excited to dig in with you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to just start right from the top. I know you developed the DX Matrix, but I want you to explain it to me and the listeners in plain English, what it is and really like what sparked the idea behind it.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually usually call it a donor experience matrix because the DX, I'm like, oh my gosh, the acronym of what is that? But it sounds very cool when you say it like that. But it used to start out when I was working with clients, it was actually a stewardship matrix, and it's evolved into this over time because I wanted clients to be able to see in one big kind of overview what it's like to be connected to their nonprofit, not just in the thanking and the engaging, but also in the soliciting, because sometimes you're doing this one part of the work in fundraising and you're not thinking about how all these parts overlap. And so for me, I'm a real visual person, so I wanted to be able to see it in one place. And I realized as an in-house person, before I moved out to helping nonprofits in the way that I do now, I was doing a lot of this work and it was just in my brain. It became really intuitive, to think about the work holistically and in layers for different segments of folks. And I found I needed to put it in a place for my clients so that they could have it when they need it, come back to it, iterate when they needed to, and all of that to make sure that their donors weren't getting lost in the shuffle, because sometimes you're so focused on a part of your work or a segment of your supporters that you're forgetting about the other folks. And so this is to really make sure that they're engaging, thanking, sharing the impact, doing all those things for everyone all year long.
Well, and when I was going through this, it really stood out. I mean, this is basically a goal that you have here in this matrix. And the big thing here are the 4 areas, right? The thank, share the impact, engage, and then solicit. What made those stand out as kind of the core building blocks when you were developing this?
Yeah, I guess I was really trying to pull those from the donor cycle, how you're thinking about donors in the cycle. So really this is for donors specifically. There's a lot of work we do to bring people into our nonprofits as supporters, but this is what happens after they give. So when you think about it as the donor life cycle, you're thanking, you're engaging, you're, bringing them close to you again before you come back and solicit them and then thank them. And the cycle just keeps going around and around, right? So I was trying to pull out those core areas and then make them really practical for folks to think about. How can we do these in a way that align with our organization's capacity, our staff capacity, and the resources we have available, in a way that aligns with our mission too, because that's an important piece of making sure that all that we're doing in nonprofit is also make sure it aligns with our values as an organization and the mission and the work and the people we're serving and all of that.
Mm-hmm. And when you developed this DX Matrix, like what is your background? Like what got you into this industry that kind of gave you the knowledge and really the experience, the wins and the losses that kind of put together this perfect, I want to almost call it a framework that every nonprofit should pretty much follow if they want to kind of grow their base?
I started working in nonprofit at a performing arts center. That's where I learned really about fundraising. I was with them for almost a decade, and it was started as a very small shop. We were under construction and we grew, and we didn't have an annual campaign. We were in a capital campaign. So we were moving into annual campaign, then we were moving into corporate sponsorships and partnerships and all these other things. And so I got to build things during that time and learned so much. And there were a lot of moving parts. Like with most small nonprofits, you have these different constituencies that you're serving and programs you're running and all of that. And so it's part of just, I guess, how my brain works too. I like to just have things organized. And I've always felt like it's really important. Nonprofits, you want to create an experience for your donors and the people that you work with and support, your board, all of this, that feels really personal and that you're paying attention and all of that. But to make that happen, you have to do a ton of work behind the scenes, right? To make that feel seamless. And this is kind of a way that I've developed to make that happen. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's really been about 15 years in-house of doing this work, working with individual donors, that I've developed this framework.
Well, and it's great because it just makes it easy to replicate the process so that any organization can take it and implement it, and even teach their team to take it and implement it, so that the founder doesn't have to do everything themselves, right? And I think that's the biggest thing in business, or even growing and scaling a nonprofit, is you got to put the systems in place so that your team can follow it if you want to continue to grow, because one person, one founder can't do everything on their own, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's such a brilliant idea of and how easily when you lay it out, it is to follow and just kind of implement and grow kind of pretty much right from day one, which is amazing. When it comes to kind of handling donor stewardship, it's a big word that everybody kind of throws around, like donor stewardship, right? But from your experience, do you think are the biggest gaps that you see when it comes to nonprofits and kind of how they handle their donors, and maybe what they are doing well and what they're not doing?
Yeah. I think the big one that I see consistently is in the thank you process, honestly. Most organizations that I come in and work with, that's one of the first things we address, because that's one of the to me, the perfect time to bring your donors close, because they've just given a gift. They feel good about giving. You want them to feel good about giving. You're happy they gave, right? But there's often, a lag time in and getting the thank you to them, right? And I'm not just talking about receipting and the thank you letter, although those parts are definitely a part of this. But thinking about it as a whole really experience in and of itself. And so in the matrix, it's essentially like, what are the other components of thanking someone that allow you to connect on a deeper level with your supporters and start to build that relationship or deepen it if they've been giving year after year, right? And so those elements of like adding in a thank you call, adding in board notes, if you have a board that's engaged and can help with that kind of thing, adding on a handwritten message at the bottom of every letter and still mailing it out in the mail with a real stamp. And you can get fun stamps that like match your nonprofit. But those little touches all kind of add up to this message of, we're so thankful that you're doing this work with us. You matter. We noticed, let's keep going together. And it takes it from that transactional moment to starting to be more of a relationship that you're building with these supporters. So.
And I think a lot of, doesn't matter if you're a large or small nonprofit, you have either a few donors or hundreds of donors. Everybody should be doing this, right? You need to be communicating regularly and thanking your donors, no matter how big or small the gift. But for teams or nonprofits that are kind of on the smaller size, that they don't have big teams or budgets, how can they realistically start using the donor experience matrix without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think it's about the layers. I like to think about the experience in layers. And as you have more capacity, you can add more layers for things, right? So there's so many tools out there where you can automate quite a bit of stuff. And automation is great. And I always say complement that with the personal, like the human touch. You don't want to over automate, but use those tools to help get a lot of those basics. Like make sure your receipting is set up and it's a warm, welcoming message. Make sure your thank you, if you do a thank you email rather than a letter for a certain level of giving, make sure those things are set up so that you can then take that extra time to pick up the phone and leave a message or write a note or things like that. So yeah, all these parts I think have layers. And you were asking about the other area where people, as far as stewardship, where I'm seeing the gaps. And I think a lot of organizations focus so heavily on one giant event for the year, and that's their big fundraiser. And I really encourage organizations to think smaller, because donors are looking for community, and they want to come out and be close to your organization and learn about what's going on. And it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. So typically in these donor experience matrix that I put together for the organizations I work with, we'll do, is it a behind the scenes tour if you're a food bank, like quarterly? Just have them on the calendar. You don't need to do these one-off tours all the time. Just quarterly do them, pick a date, have them on the calendar, get it set up so you're inviting donors to come. Or do you have something that's happening on site that you could bring people to come and experience along with you? I don't have a good example for that one, but actually this school I'm working with now, they do with their students a butterfly release. So it was like, okay, can we invite our students, our donors, to come and watch this moment with our second graders as they release the butterflies? Like, what is it? It doesn't just, you don't have to have a whole bunch that you give to donors in those situations. It's just about the experience of being there. And so I think that's kind of a reframe and a mindset shift that a lot of nonprofits need to have, because it doesn't take a lot to do those things, but they're super powerful and meaningful for your supporters.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but this is one thing that I hear all the time is like, how do you just stay consistent with your donor engagement? So, how can kind of, when they implement the donor experience matrix, how can that help that and be more consistent and kind of just stay on track?
Yeah. A lot of it is habit building, right? So you create this thing, and the idea is that you have it all laid out, but as you go along and you keep building these muscles of doing these things, like, okay, every day I'm going to make a call and thank somebody, or every day so and so in the office is going to produce these letters, and the next day I will sign them, and then the next, you create these habits that happen really regularly, and then you don't have to even look at this anymore, right? But it's also about calendaring things. So I always complement this with a fundraising calendar and a plan. So it's like it's got it all blocked out by a timeline, so that you can, every time if you're meeting once a month to review what's on the agenda for the following month, and you're looking like, okay, here are the things that we're doing, and they just become regular and habitual for your team, because that's where it becomes easier. It's lighter, and you don't have to reinvent every time. You just keep going, doing the right things, repeatedly, and that's where the success comes from.
And when someone implements the matrix, like how do they know when it's actually working? Like what should they be measuring to determine whether this is successful for them or not?
Retention. I mean, that's really all that not all, but that's the bottom line of our work, right? We talk about that a lot in the industry, that retention is falling, and a lot of it's because teams aren't, for lack of a better phrase, they're not paying attention to it, right? It's not where they're focused. They're thinking about the next big event, or they're thinking about this program or that campaign or whatever it is. And a lot of teams don't even know their number. Like, so you start the year, you know what your retention is, and then you can measure it year over year over year. And the value of those relationships just starts to go up, and it's a compound effect, right? And built in, and this one that I do for most of my clients is a renewal campaign. So you're thinking too about solicitation, not just in like your year-end campaign, but how are we soliciting donors on a regular basis based on their own timelines, and all of that kind of stuff builds into fundraising growth, donor retention, and these long-term donor relationships, right?
Yeah, and I love asking this next question because I love like a lot of our listeners just they want the quick wins. They want to take actionable insights. So what would be some quick wins or a small change that a small nonprofit could make that can kind of really move the needle with donor retention? Something that they maybe are not thinking that's probably just the easiest thing to implement that they can do tomorrow or even this afternoon, and really start to kind of build that momentum and that habit.
Yeah, I've said this several times on the call, but it's probably because I believe in it so much, is call your donors. just call them, thank them. When you get a gift, you see it come in, you pick up the phone, you make a call. You just have to make it part of your regular habit. And I think, I'm not sure why, but I think sometimes people are afraid to call, like, oh, will it be a good time? What will I say? But they go such a long way in that donor retention when you're thinking about the whole picture of things. That's definitely top on my list is those things in that thank you section, because once an organization really gets that in better shape and then moves through these other kind of modules, I guess, of the work, then it all starts to come together.
Well, and I think about it too. I think people are just scared. They're like, oh, I don't want to bother them. They're probably busy. I don't want to sound like fake. But I look at it like, hey, they just gave you a gift, like whether it's a wedding gift or a birthday gift or anything. And you normally send a thank you card or you call. Like we make my wife and I make our kids call the aunts and uncles to thank them for the birthday gift and the Christmas gifts, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same concept of like, hey, pick up the phone and just say thank you. It could be a 3 minute conversation or a 2 minute or 1 minute or even just a voicemail or text message. I think that goes,
Voicemails are huge, right? I mean,
yeah.
they sit on their phone, they'll still read it. They're like, "Oh, wow, they took the time to call me." Like, and that was like what, 30 seconds of your time, and you can get through 10 of those. Like, imagine the impact of 10 of those voicemails. It's a lot.
Oh man, I mean, I just think about how, yeah, you just go through and just start dialing, and you're going to get some people, but 90% of them probably will go straight to voicemail. You can get through 10 really quick. You might have one conversation, but I guarantee that donor will appreciate that and become a lifelong donor if you do that, because I guarantee the majority of the other organizations that they're donating to do not do that.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It's not hard to stand out, unfortunately, in some of these things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like what you just said there. It's not hard to stand out. It's just you have to do it, and you have to not be afraid to make a phone call and just thank somebody, right? Um, you know, Donors aren't just like one size fits all, right? So how can a nonprofit tweak the donor experience matrix to work differently for the different kind of donors that they have, whether it's like monthly givers or legacy donors or one-time donors? Like, how can they kind of tweak the program, depending on the type of donor?
Yeah. Well, monthly donors, um, yeah, they're obviously their own group, and there's a lot of content about monthly donors. And yes, you definitely want to be speaking to that group specifically, but for small nonprofits, I think it is once you welcome them in and they become part of that regular group, there's also a lot you can do. Across the board as far as sharing impact and doing small tweaks. You've asked a lot of questions about like low capacity nonprofits, which we know they're out there, right? So it's like, how can you do like weekly emails or monthly emails and then tweak them for your different audiences, right? So it's changing words here or there to segment so that your donors know that you're talking to them. I mean, I didn't put in here the personalization piece, but that's where a lot of this is, right? You do that out of your CRM, you pull out their first name. You're not calling them friend. You're calling them by their name because you know them and you know that they're, a monthly donor. You know that they have given, this is like year after year after year, they're a long time donor, or you're talking to them about renewing, whatever it is. Those are ways it's really segmentation and understanding how you're thinking and looking about those different groups to just show them that you're paying attention, right? I think a lot of the stuff I talk about is that piece is like, let them know that let them know that they just gave for the second time. Like when you call to make that thank you call, or you write at the bottom of the note, we're so glad you gave again. Like, then they're like, oh, they noticed. This is my second year of giving, or this is my fifth year of giving. So there's ways to layer on those personalizations. Um, yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. So, last question before we go into kind of our final thoughts here. But the larger nonprofits that have really big donor lists, this is a question that I think about all the time. Is how can you kind of keep things feeling personal without burning out our teams, right? How do you just kind of implement this when you have large lists, not to get overwhelmed, not to freak out your team when they have to reach out to everybody or try to make this communication with them? Any tips or advice that you have for the larger organization with big lists?
Yeah, I mean, I worked in a really large organization for a while, and a lot of that was in higher ed, and so once you start getting large, you also start having large teams, right? And then you can break off pieces that they own or caseloads or things like that to help be able to focus on certain segments of people. But I think, there's a lot of cool tools out there. Once you get to really big, like, are you sending videos? There's so many text tools now that you can send that also would, I think, show that you're standing out, because not very many organizations are sending these out. So I think once you get to those the volumes, when you're scaling up, I think really taking advantage of tools that allow you to personalize things at scale is really important. Right now, I work with organizations that are raising typically between 1 and 3 million. So we're still in kind of that small to mid-sized nonprofit zone, which is really where I love to be. I love to work in this space because you really do get to connect with more people. But I think at that higher level too, you have to give folks opportunities to raise their hand and say they want deeper connection. And so sometimes that looks like, is it a behind the scenes tour? I don't know, but is there something that you're inviting them to that's because they're a donor and a supporter, and you're giving them access to something? I've done really successfully like roundtables. We did it in higher ed with roundtables with the dean for donors at a certain level. People showed up on Zoom. We did some things in person. But they're invited. And I think that's part of it too. Once you start to get to these larger scales, it's just inviting people into opportunities where they can opt in or out, but they're there for them. And then from there, you can move those relationships to another level if they're interested.
Nice. Well, I know you created some freebies for our listeners today. Tell us a little bit about what you want to give everybody that's listening today that can kind of get them on the right path to implementing the matrix.
Yeah, well, it is a template of the matrix. So I've got that where you can download it with some tips to go along with it. And if you download it and have questions, I answer my emails, so you can always respond and ask questions or whatever. But there's a couple samples in there, a lot of room for you to fill in to make it match what your organization does. But at least it gives you the structure to start to think about your donor universe and the experience holistically. So hopefully people will find it useful.
Nice. And that link is going to be in the bio, or is in the bio when you're listening to it now. And last thing, where can people find you? What's the best spot that you hang out, you answer questions, and people can kind of get into your world?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I love the DMs. Feel free to send me one. I started showing up there about a year ago, and it's been fun to meet all sorts of new people. So if you're on there, find me there, send me a note, and look forward to connecting.
Awesome. Well, that link is also in the bio. So everybody go follow Katie. Katie, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom today on the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. And would love to have you back again in a future episode and learn more information of how we can help nonprofits grow and scale.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me, Tom. This was awesome.
Thank you for tuning in to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. If you'd like free resources to take your nonprofit to the $1 million mark, visit realtomkelly.com/playbooks. And because I'm committed to helping nonprofits maximize their impact and reach as many people as possible, contact us at hello@realtomkelly.com to explore bringing me in to speak at your next event. And as always, I'm looking forward to sharing more transformative insights with you on our next episode.